right, we're here in South Florida with one of the all-time greats and one of my personal favorites, Bobby Ussery, two-time winner of the Kentucky Derby. One he got paid for and one he didn't, and Hall of Famer and probably one of the best riders of his day, and a colony of riders that were just outstanding riders. So we're happy to have Bobby Ussery on Indian Charlie TV, and Bobby, we want to thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
First thing I'd get into is what about how did you come up before you were a rider? Who did you work under, or were you around horses as a kid? What was your background that brought you to the racetrack?
Well, I was originally riding quarter horses, and I was in the quarter horse field. I would, they had a race. They wasn't supposed to be racing, but they wasn't legalized, but they raced anyway.
Unsanctioned races?
Texas and Oklahoma.
It's Texas now. Is that where you're from originally?
No, Oklahoma.
You're from Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. What town?
Off a town called Vian.
Vian, Oklahoma.
Population 1,000.
Oh, boy. Yeah. There's a lot of good people in Oklahoma.
You blink your eyes, you go right by the town.
Yeah, that's funny. So you had a little bit of so you came up through quarter horses, and so when you switched over to thoroughbreds, who did you come up under? What trainers?
Well, I never really had no one to teach me. What I did was work for different people, and I never had no one really, to teach you what. But I got with the guy called Tommy Oliphant. I met him in Denver, Colorado. They had a track there called Centennial Park. It was in Littleton, Colorado.
I've heard of Centennial, and a lot of good horsemen came from out that way, didn't they?
Well, I had basically went over to Omaha, Nebraska. They was having racing there, but I was only 15-year-old, and they ran me off because they wouldn't let me gallop horses there because I was underage, and you had to have your mother's consent or something like that. So then I go over to Denver, and I run into Tommy Oliphant, and he told me if I would stay with him and help him and go back to Del Rio, Texas with him and help him break these 2-year-olds, that he would take me to the fairgrounds and take a contract out on me and start me riding. So I galloped for him, then we went back to Del Rio, broke the babies, and then we go to New Orleans, and I'm galloping 3, walking 3, that's the way I was, where you come up in that era. And opening day, it was they had a race called the Thanksgiving Day Handicap, and this guy Ernest Lane used to lease horses from the King Ranch, and he had this mare called Ridicule, and she was in a race, but they tried to she had 104 pound on her, and the riders they tried to get, they were already taken. So because I had a 10-pound allowance, I had never ridden on a major racetrack. I'd ridden in the bush in a small league, but so Tommy said, let's put Bobby on her.
You could do the weight.
Yeah, and she won.
Your first mount?
Yeah, it was a Thanksgiving Day Handicap.
Was your first mount?
Yep.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Pot was 7,500.
That was
in 51.
That was some money back then.
Well, man, he was sitting on gold. And then that
man, like you could be dangerous in New Orleans, in a town like New Orleans, with all that much money.
But in that era, that's when you could get anything. Very, nothing was expensive. Everything was built. In fact, I bought a new car for $2,000.
Okay, so from there, I'm sure I'm going to assume you had much more success early in your career after that.
Well, yeah, I did very well at the fairgrounds, and then they wanted to take me to Chicago. People that wanted, but then a trainer called Homer Pardue.
Homer Pardue, I knew Homer.
Going to New England, so apparently Tommy liked him, and he said, he's a good guy, you go with him. So I went with Homo Fardu to New England. And that year I would have probably been leading rider of the country that year. But I run into another jockey called Anthony Desperito, which was leading rider. He was leading rider of that in '52. I think he was leading rider of the country. But instead of him, it would have been me because we both had the apprentice, and some days we'd split the card. You know, he'd win 5, I'd win 4, you know, and I thought, you know, that was you know, would have been a good thing to do have, but I did well after that. You know, then I went to I stayed with Homer for then after I lost the bug, I go back to New Orleans. After I lost the apprentice, they call it the apprenticeship. Went back to New Orleans, and I couldn't buy him out. That's how, you know.
That's the way it works sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I stayed with it. I kept galloping, you know, and running different barns, and I finally decided to go back to New England, and that's where I got started again. And
Rockingham and Suffolk.
I got Suffolk Downs, yes, and I rode the Rockingham and Lincoln Downs. I went 47 races in 16 days at the Lincoln Downs.
Wow, that's hard to do. That's a
yeah,
lot.
Well, I was rocking.
Yeah, yeah. Now, so from there, how did you transform yourself and get over to New York?
Well, I worked in New England for like maybe, I think 5, 6, 7 years. So then Lucien Lauren and a couple other Yorkie McLeod. Those trainers asked me, said, "Well, why don't you come to New York?" And because I was leading rider, but leading rider in New England. But naturally in Florida in the wintertime, I didn't do so good, you know. But they said, "Why don't you come to New York?" And so in 1955, I went to New York, and the rest is on the books, you know.
Well, you certainly had a storied career. There's a lot of questions I have to ask. One, let's before we get into your derbies, let's talk about some of the greatest horses that you've ridden.
Well, actually, I won almost every stake in the country, but I never really had a horse like Kelso, or you know, I never had a solid horse. They could have been solid, but they broke down. Hilda Reason was the best 2-year-old. He was 2-year-old of the year. He could do anything.
And you rode him?
Yeah, he could do. He was going to be my champion, older horse, but he didn't. I think he practiced Sismar or something like that. But I won. I rode a lot of good horses. I didn't. I rode like horses that I rode Quadrangle in the Derby. I got beat. But then he came back. He came back and won the Belmont. I rode Northern Dancer, finished third on him.
No kidding.
I never forget. I rode him at Hialeah, and they said don't hit the horse. I didn't hit, but the horse lugged in with me. When the first time out, he lugged in with me, and he hit the fence. He brushed it, and they said, "Oh, they blamed me for that," and they took me off, and they came back and won 8 in a row. I said, "Well, I didn't hurt him too bad."
Yeah, no kidding.
Know,
yeah.
And but I didn't really get. But I did ride him, and I think he finished third that day.
Yeah.
But he should have won. He got knocked down leaving the gate. He was the best, and that was politics probably got me off.
Yeah, you know that happens, and
Yeah.
when you're riding in white pants, that's
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah.
Well, if you don't win, winning is the thing.
So, what about some of the other great horsemen that you rode for? Let's get into some of them.
God, I mean, I rode for Woody. You know, Woody has a record which will stand forever. He went another five Belmonts. No one's going to ever do that. I rode for Woody. I rode for York McLeod. I rode for Stevens. I rode for almost every top trainer around.
Now I'm going to ask you about a guy that I absolutely love. And I was around him very late in his career, Boo Gentry.
Oh, I won the Derby for him.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know you did. And
but I rode for him before. I rode for him at Randall Park. He was at Randall Park, which they had a track there in Ohio, right across the street from Thistle Downs.
Right, I remember. I mean, I don't remember Randall Park, but I know they were.
Well, Lloyd was there, and Lloyd put me on a lot of winners there. And then I rode for the Winnick boys, and they were big time in my era. And I rode for anybody that was. Then Homer, I rode for him.
Now, I know a lot of your success came on horses for Darby Dan.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about Mr. Galbraith.
Yeah.
I'm sure you had a association with him. Tell us about him.
It wasn't him so much. It was, I think I heard, I don't know how true it is, but I heard that Mr. Galbraith, like, if his trainer was there, he'd like say, you pick out, if you can't get the rider you want, you pick out one of the 4
top riders
on the list.
Leading riders at the meet.
Leading riders at the meet. And I never really, I more or less knew Gentry, Lloyd, better than I did Mr. Galbraith. I mean,
right.
I knew him, and then it was good. We had a good relationship. But he had his day. I had my day with him. So.
Yeah, that was great that you could do that. And then now let's talk about the Derby. Let's talk about Proud Clarion. I know that he was second in the Bluegrass, and then came back and won the Derby. And if I'm not mistaken, he came from pretty far back. You remember the race?
Yeah, he came. He was probably about 8th or 9th or 10th in the field of. I think they only run like that era. I think they run 18, 19 or something like that. I wasn't assigned to that horse. In fact, I was assigned to ride a mare called Straight Deal, which was a great.
Oh
great
man,
yard.
yeah, she was big time.
I had a call with Hearst Jacobs, but they called. Either Lloyd called my agent or Mr. Galvin, someone, and 3 days before the race, and wanted me to ride Proud Clarion. So I said, well, I'll have to go. I went and took off. I went to see Mr. Jacobs, Hearst Jacobs, and explained to him that I had a chance to ride in the Derby, and I'd like to go ride in the Derby, and would it be all right if he could get another rider? He said, well, if I can get this one rider, there's no problem. So he got another top rider to ride his horse, Straight Deal.
Oh yeah, she was something.
So. And then I came down to ride, because I felt that Proud Clarion, he finished second on the Bluegrass. I said, well, if the horse can finish second to almost the favorite, I think, Diplomat Way or something.
Diplomat Way might have won the Bluegrass, but I know.
But he was one of the favorites for the Derby.
I know the favorite was Damascus. I do know that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Diplomat Way was probably one of the favorites.
He was, so I said, well, if he only got beat a couple lengths to Diplomat Way, I figured, I said, he said, well, about it.
More distance.
Yeah, well, let me take a shot with this horse. But I got the horse the right day. There's days that horses liable to do anything. I mean, the Derby was his best race ever. I mean, he run some other good races, but nothing like in the Derby. And then, like I say, he came up and I beat Damascus. Damascus was like 1-9 or something like that in the race.
Yeah, he was definitely the favorite in the race. And that was a year when a lot of good horses, Damascus,
Well, Damascus was the standout horse now, and I don't know what happened to that horse. You know, I got a chance. I stayed with Mr. Whiteley for a few days. I went up to his farm and stayed with him, and I asked him. I said, Frank, I said, what happened to that Damascus that day? Because he came back and won the the Preakness and Belmont by many.
Yes.
And I said, what happened? He told me. He says, he didn't know.
Huh.
He said, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because,
go ahead.
Because he was, when I got to him, I spread horses on going in the turn. I got lucky. I got in between horses. And then when I got up behind Schumacher, which was on
Damascus,
it looked to me like he had never moved yet. I said, oh man, I'm going to be in trouble here. But when he asked him, he didn't. Damascus didn't fire. But Proud Clarion did. He fired that day. He ran the last quarter 23 or something like that, which was phenomenal then.
Yeah, back in those days of deeper racetracks, that was pretty unheard of. Well, you know what? All my life I've heard about what a great trainer Hearst Jacobs was, but you know those come from like Alan Jerkins and people that were around him, and they just said he was absolutely one of the best.
Yeah.
So. You were around him some?
I rode him. I rode a lot. I rode a lot for he trained straight deal.
Yeah.
I had a lot of success with Hearst. I rode a lot of good horses for him. He was a nice person.
What about now? So let's move on to Dancer's Image Derby. You came from way back on him as well.
Well, there's a story behind that because I went over to Maryland to ride. Otto Winnick got me to come over to ride a filly in a $25,000 race. In my era, that was a big race. That was a feature race for $25,000. So I said, okay. And in the co-feature, I picked up Dancer's Image, and so I said, well, I'll go ahead and ride him. Usually I didn't. But if I went out of town to ride horses, I didn't like to ride a lot of horses.
You don't want the pickups from the locals?
Well, in case something happened to me, because I'm gonna tell the story about that a little later. Because you don't want anything. Because you're getting paid to come ride this one horse, and you don't want to be riding some other horse, and the horse stumbles and you fall, and then you can't ride fulfill your engagements.
Right.
But anyway, that horse. That day, he ran the best race he ever run in his life. He never run another race like that. But Dancer's Image, he won that day. But everybody was rushing him, putting him up on the lead. He was always a speed horse. Well, this day he stumbled leaving the gate, and I'm last, going 7/8 a mile I think it was Laurel. Bowie, I believe it was, and I just gathered him up and let him settle, and being played with him for a while. Damn, if he don't get up and win. I said, well, this is the secret on the horse. He wants to come from behind instead of being forced early. And that's where, like in the Derby, I was way back in the Derby.
Yeah, I want to say either last or next to last. You came from.
Yeah, I was like 14th. At one time.
So you win the race, and a couple days go by, and how'd you find out that the test came back? How'd that come?
I was on the golf course. I was playing golf with my friends. Somebody come by and said, "You got a horse? He's getting disqualified." I said, "Well, I thought the guy was kidding at first. Disqualified." So I didn't know anything about that. And then they said. That there was an objection and whatever, but there's a lot of stuff. There was a lot of talk about that, and I don't want to go in that because none of it's over, and it's official, and most all the people are past. They're going bye. So
yeah. Well, I mean, like you say, there was it was a sad situation, and I remember. I was coming home from high school, had the radio on a car. It sounded like Martians that landed at 4th and Central when they said the horse is disqualified. You just didn't even give that a thought, at those times.
I'm going to tell you another story now. Dr. Harthill, which was a big vet there in Kentucky, he told me, I didn't ask him, he volunteered this about maybe a couple years later or something. I saw him. He says, Bobby, he says, I don't know what happened.
Well, something happened, and it was, it's a shame that it was something as innocuous as butazolidine.
Yeah.
Which was.
At first they said they found a trace, but they admitted they did give it to the horse, I think, but it was like almost 6-7 days before the race because they worked him, and they worked him with it, something, but it should have went out of his system by then.
Yeah, that's really an unfortunate deal.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's gone and it's done, and you can sit and elaborate on it, but nothing's going to be changed.
Right. Well, you after your riding career, I know I was down here a couple years working as a groom or doing something, and you were an agent. So I remember seeing you riding around as an agent, and you had some riders that won some races.
The top rider I had was Eddie Maple. I mean, a known rider. But I did very well as an agent. I liked that being an agent, because you were around the people. And you fold up and you go, but I worked for Eddie 1 year. We had very, very successful, and but I didn't want to. I told him, I said, I don't want to go back. I don't want to come back to New York. I don't want that. The living, I had to live all the way over by the airport, and it was just too much traffic. Now, I mean, naturally, I like Saratoga because there you had a house and you're close to the racetrack. But that was a good year. I enjoyed that year. I had a lot of fun.
Now, let me ask you about this. I know you told me one time you rode a winter, maybe a winter or two in California.
I worked in California. But there was nothing more neater than coming out of the paddock at Santa Anita and going under that tunnel, and then coming out, and you got these huge mountains right in front of you. I mean, that used to enlighten me. I said, "Whoa, this is great." Yeah,
it certainly is a beautiful place. And but you didn't stay out there.
I worked there. I stayed up there almost 3-4 months, but I couldn't. I didn't get a hold, and I wasn't getting what I felt I was supposed to get. With my talent, I was supposed to have been riding for better horses, and I went all the way to Delmar with them. So I said, hey, I've had enough of this. Let me get out of here. And I went back to New York.
Now, you've ridden against some of the greatest riders, and of all the riders that you rode against, name a few that stand out for their abilities.
Well, I mean, Eddie Arkell he was the master when I went to New York. That's what they called him, the master. And he was probably and I say he rode good horses, but good riders know what to do with good horses. Some riders don't know what to do with good horses, and that makes a big difference. But Eddie was great, and Schumacher, well, he was he was just a natural. He was the game was made for him. He didn't weigh 100 pounds. And he was light, never had to reduce, and he had he had a lot of help. There was everybody seemed to like him, and he was like he. In fact, on Northern Dancer, they took me all but Schumacher on him. I mean that's how good he was. He was a good rider, but he also rode good horses.
Yeah.
It's hard, really hard. That was a tough question because there were so many other riders that could ride that were good that you can't really mention all the names. So
Yeah. I mean,
we're just picking. We're picking out the ones that were.
Yeah. I mean, you rode against the Jacintos and all those guys. Ikaza. What about him? Now he had a reputation of being would put you in a little rough, tight spot. Yeah.
Here's a guy. He's gone now, but he had a lot of help. But he did not want to keep a straight course. He wanted to bother somebody in the race, or he wasn't happy because he rode a lot. He rode a lot of good horses. He was riding for Woody Stevens, Guggenheim.
Yeah.
And he just didn't. He didn't want. I don't know what was in his mind.
What about? Well, I was going to say, what about some of the stewards that you were around? Some of those old guys, Keen Dangerfield, and some of those guys.
Those New York stewards were as good. You didn't want to get a guy called Francis Dunn. You didn't want to make him mad. And then they had Cal Rainey, and there was a couple others. Davis. David, I can't think of his name, but he was. They were a little more stricter than they are, I think, in my era than they are today.
Without question, yeah.
They would take numbers down for less than wasn't afraid to take a number down.
Yeah.
Sometimes it looked to me like it's just changed.
Yeah. Huh. What about now? Now you rode in New York and you spent most of your winters in Florida. Celebrities, I guess you knew a lot of them. I mean, what?
I met everybody.
I mean, the one I like,
the best. After I won the Derby on Proud Clarion, I run into Frank Sinatra, and he wanted to know why didn't you tell me about it? I said, well, Frank, I said I didn't want no one to knock the odds down. And but anybody that was anybody in my era went to the races.
Right. Another name I was going to bring up, and I know that would be Jackie Gleason. You ever around him?
Gleason, I didn't know, but but I heard. To me, he was a funny guy. I never met him. But my friends didn't meet him. In fact, there was a couple of riders that knew him, and they used to play golf with him. And but I never met him.
Okay.
I would have liked to have met him.
Yeah.
But I met Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
And anybody was anybody,
Yeah, no. They went to the races. Those people.
In my era.
Yeah.
And if you went to California, you could meet all the movie actors. In my era, meeting a movie actor was a big deal. I mean, today, I don't.
Right. Well, television, it was, if you're talking about the late 50s, early 60s, TV was just getting cranked up, you know.
Yeah.
So,
and
movies,
But it seemed like in Santa Anita, more or less, the Del Mar, it seemed like more of the movie stars. They all rode up there. For the races, Betty Grable and all of it, But New York, we didn't have the movies, But anybody that was anybody in New York went to Belmont Park.
That's pretty cool. I guess the one other thing I was going to ask you would be when you quit riding, was it just pretty much a weight that made you give it up, or did you just feel like you'd done enough, or?
Well, I didn't want to quit, but I'd taken some time off and I put on weight, and I tried to cut the weight where I could ride. Then I came back to ride, and I was embarrassed at myself. The horse had 119. I think I did 20 on those, 25 on those. I got in the limit, I mean, I said, that was the last race I rode at Calder. Horse finished third. And I was embarrassed. I was embarrassing myself because, I mean, I was reducing. And that's the best I could do. So I said, yeah, I've had enough.
Were you around Hardtack any?
Yeah.
How was he to be around?
I never had no problem with him.
Yeah, I'm sure he was probably good in the room. Outside, some of the outside distractions he didn't much care for, but
I never had no problem with Hardtack. I respected his talent. You know, I went to he had a lot of parties. But he was a bachelor, and he had a house close to where all the stewardesses trained and all that. And they always had, you know, when he had a party, it was a party.
Yeah. Well, he was certainly one of the great ones.
Yeah, but I never had no trouble with him. I never. But he just didn't. I don't know. He didn't get along with the press for some reason.
I think that's all it was. You know, he didn't want to sign autographs, and he didn't want to deal with the press.
Well, but it's just like the press is now. Fake news.
Fake news, right?
It's just like it is. Nothing's changed.
No, I've often said Bill Hardtack was ahead of his time. With the media. Yeah, he didn't.
Yeah, he was.
They weren't doing him any favors, and he wasn't doing them any.
No, I think he did it because they wrote more about him because he wouldn't talk to them. So.
I know he was. That didn't apply to Joe Hirsch. I know they were good friends.
No, Joe. Yeah, him and Joe were good friends.
And I'm sure you had some dealings with Joe Hirsch, the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Or that we're aware of.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but Hardtack was real close to Joe Hirsch. They spent time together. But time changes. People change.
Yeah. Things do change, and of course, this horse business is not nearly the same as it was. I think you saw the better days, and
well, different people.
Yeah.
It's the people that have changed.
Horses were more durable. They could run. Wasn't anything for a horse to run 20 times a year or more.
Well, Bellyache as a 2-year-old run 20 sometimes.
Belly.
As a 2-year-old.
20 something times as a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Now, did you ride? I know. I think he was second in the Derby, but I don't think you rode him in the Derby.
I picked him up, and when he went, I rode him in the Derby.
You did?
Yeah, I was second to Venetian Way.
That's okay. You did ride him in the Derby. Good.
I picked him up in the fall of the year, and they had a race called the Garden State. It was run in Jersey.
Yeah.
It was a big money race for 2-year-olds.
Actually, I think back then that might have been the biggest part of the year for anything.
It was like the Breeders' Cup.
Right.
Is today.
Right.
Because the race was over 200 and some thousand. Well, they didn't. That was a big race in that era.
Right.
Now it was like the Breeders' Cup, and I picked him up, but I finished second to I forgot the horse's name. Nice horse. Bill Winfrey trained the horse. I forgot the horse's name. But then and I finished second in the Garden State. Then after that, they brought him here to Florida. That horse, I hate to, was over raced. I won the Preakness on him I won the Preakness. A week later, I won the Jersey Derby. People don't run. When a horse today wins a big race, wins one of the big ones, you don't see him for another 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, they'll.
I mean, I won the Preakness, and a week later, I won the Jersey Derby.
Isn't that something?
But after the Jersey Derby, that was he went in the slop, and he come back. He didn't make the Belmont.
He didn't make the Belmont. Okay.
He would have won the Belmont if he'd have made it, but he didn't make it.
Huh. Well, Bobby, I certainly want to thank you for being on Indy Charlie TV. I'm sure our viewers are going to really enjoy hearing what you had to say about the game back in. I want to say probably what we'd call a golden era of the sport, and of course, things have changed, and but it was certainly good to have you on the show, and Anything else you can think of that came?
We covered
Yeah,
a lot of ground.
Yeah, we sure did. Well, we're gonna call that a wrap. And again, I want to thank you for being on Indian Charlie TV.
Thank you.